Okay, let us resume. We'll get ourselves back together and go ahead and show you some useful techniques, things you can do with this flash detector tool to hopefully make the issue of solving these issues or these problems a little bit better. So one thing I should do, just because I didn't do it last time and I got stung by it, is let me just save. When I save that Navisworks file, what's happening is this flash detection set has been saved too, or these conditions have been saved. The nice thing is, since it's a live dynamic file, if I go ahead and reopen this and rerun the report, it'll sort of show me the true number of flashes after I made some revisions to it. So it's all live. It's really good at this. You're defining criteria, and then we can keep on rerunning the test, and when we rerun the test, it'll update itself. Hopefully that number will keep on dropping. Okay, but saving saves the criteria and saves pointers to the file. Okay, so the idea is as follows. I've got these ducts, they're running into these beams. I'm having some sort of problem over here. I want to go through and fix that. I can give you the printout, and you could find them over in the Revit file, but it sure would be nice if we could actually just get to the Revit file and do that. Okay, and there's a great tool called Switchback, which allows you to do that. So it'll work between the Revit files in Navisworks. It wouldn't work for some other file formats, but it's very good for getting the Revit files through. And how you use it is you go over to Revit, and here, for example, is my little architectural model. And I think even in this architectural, or this MEP model, I think I went through and hid, if I remember, that architectural. Oh, it's the structural model. That's actually the one I want to see. I'm going to unhide that. Because as I was playing around doing this morning, someone pointed out that, gee, well, it's awfully nice to be able to see what's happening with the ductwork, but it makes a lot more sense if you could actually see the structure in place too, and then you can start to understand where the conflicts are between different things. Actually, as I look at that, did I move that? Let me just kind of take a look. It looks like it's kind of too far down. I'm just trying to get a sense. Maybe it's right. Okay, they're conflicting. They're doing what I sort of expect in the scheme of things. Okay, let me pop that back out again. So here's the deal. You got a Revit file. You want to be able to talk to it from the Navisworks file. All you really got to do is get it all set up and ready to talk. And how you do that is as follows. When you install Navisworks, it actually installs a couple little add-ins, little extensions to Revit, and you'll find them under the add-ins menu. There's one that's all about exporting your Revit file to Navisworks. We don't actually need to use that very much because Navisworks has that built right into it. Navisworks just automatically does that for you when you say open a Revit file. It's really just kind of a cheat. It just kind of makes that happen. Actually, here's STL export. We talked about that. That's, again, sort of an add-in. I can take this 3D model and create something that can be 3D printed. But the other one I want to show you is Navisworks Switchback. And when I start Switchback, I think I started it and didn't get something else wrong. Navisworks Switchback. Okay. It's kind of incredibly anticlimactic. It doesn't seem to do anything. But what it did do is it put Revit in sort of a listening mode. So it's waiting to get a call from Navisworks. Okay, so let me show you how it actually works. I'll go back over to Navisworks. Okay, I am looking at a rectangular duct conflicting with a beam over here. If I would like to go through and see that rectangular duct in Revit, what I do is I choose it in the list. So as I have it chosen here, just choose it in the list. And I choose this button here, which switches back. When I click that button, with any luck, Revit does a little dance down in the taskbar to indicate that something happened. And if I switch back over to Revit, you see, it actually highlights that duct. Okay, so I have a little information now, and now I can start thinking about changing that duct, making the change in Revit. Let me go back over to Navisworks. I'll do a different one. Okay, let me go popping on down the list a little further. Here's another clash. Okay, again, looks like I have some big old rectangular duct, and it is conflicting with this being coming across. It's this big, long run of duct. That's going to probably be a pretty good one to fix. So what I'll do is I'll say switchback. Go back over to Revit. Can you actually see it there? What I'm not seeing in this view is I'm not seeing the structural model. Let me see if I can actually make the structural model visible so you can sort of see that in there too. Why is the linked model not showing to me right now? I'm going to think about that in just a second. It should be. I'm going to take a look and sort of see what's going on in terms of my linked models, because I want to see that. It doesn't even show it linked in there. Okay, let me link it in again. Or did I open a different version of it? Oh, wait, I know it. Well, hang on just a second here. Let me close this out. Because there's the mechanical model, there's the linked model. I think what happened, remember when I crashed a little while ago? I pointed back to the fixed version as opposed to the not so fixed one. Let me delete this thing out. And let me reappend. When I reappended, I didn't do the right thing. I wanted to come back to actually the session 17 model, only because I fixed things in the session 18 model, so it's not very interesting. Let me go back to Revit and I'll open that one up. Okay, I got 32 there. Let me rerun this test. Select you. Oh, I no longer have that model selected. And I always have to sort of figure out why it's not sort of giving me what I want. It's because I changed the model underneath it. Let's run the test. Okay, so now I think we're good. Okay, let me see if I can get this to work. I'll say rectangular duct. I'll do the switchback. I'll come back over here. Oops, that's that one again. Let me eave it in here. I'm just going to take a look at the links. Still not looking like it's linked. Hang on. Oh, because I probably didn't do it yet. We switch back to 3D. Let me link that Revit file in again. And I'll apologize for doing a little bit of fumbling around in here. I was trying to link it in there so you can sort of see these two things together.
You link the MEP model in
to the MEP model?
Yeah.
Well, that's not a very smart thing to do at all, is it? You're right. That's actually that's a particularly unsmart thing to do. Okay, let's do this. Well, before I drive myself absolutely crazy, which is a distinct possibility, let's do this. I'm going to open the MEP model, the session 17 MEP model. Then I'm going to link to the structural model in session 18. I'm very happy you guys are here watching, because otherwise I'd be totally confused. Okay, 18. The structural model there. Okay, let's turn this on now. I'll do a little looking around. That's looking nice and conflicty. Okay, so we'll turn on my switchback. So under the add-ins, switchback. Okay, now we'll go back over to Navisworks, and hopefully I have the same models all in here. I'll say switchback. Okay, that's that first one. Let's go back to something a little bit more interesting. That's interesting, because I'm again here. It's like I'm opening the wrong file. I have it in there. It keeps on opening the wrong file on me, is basically what it's doing underneath it all. Well, in any case, let me switch this around and start see this again for a second, because that's actually the more fixed version of it. Oh, let me do this. Let me just link this in here and I'll see if I can get this to work. Again, linking the Revit file. Structural model. Ah, not center to center. That's about to get me in trouble. Link it, structural model, origin to origin. Okay, let's see if that's going to be any better in terms of looking like it's going to create some problems. Okay, I'm switching back. Well, that's a funny view. That may be a little bit better. Hang on. Just trying to choose a clash. Boy, if I manage to confuse myself in terms of what's going on. There it is. Actually, I could sort of see them there, but I have this too much of the floor and all that kind of stuff showing right now. Let me put this back again and see if I can figure out how to make this a little more visible to you. The problem is that you're sort of looking at the floor all the way through there right now. Let's see if I can hide this out. Trying to demonstrate something very simple, but it's really fighting me. Let's see if we can make this work. Okay. We can start to see a little bit what's going on in terms of the ducts running into that stuff. So, again, switching it back over here. You see that we have sort of a basic issue there. There's that piece of ductwork. It's running into the pipes. We're sort of having all sorts of funny issues there right now. So in terms of fixing this, part of the problem is right now, this thing is running around at 10'10" above the floor level right now, which is sort of putting it squarely in the same zone as all these structural elements. So we can fix that, and it's pretty easy to go through and fix things like this. For something like this, we could go ahead and say that, you know, I really would like to just go to run that at a different level. For example, if I ran that at 9 feet and apply that, okay, you might actually be able to bring the whole system down underneath. I might need to redesign the ductwork so that things aren't overlapping, but I probably now have that piece of duct removed so that it's no longer conflicting with the structural elements. So that's pretty good. I'm going to have to do something with the supply and the return ducts, but at least have them all riding below there. The nice thing about the model is if I move that main duct down, it pulls everything down. So it not only pulled the main duct down, it pulled the whole system down and sort of kept everything all hooked up. So that actually wasn't a bad change. Just sort of one simple change probably fixed a whole host of problems. So what can you do now? Once you have that, you can go through and this is where I get myself in trouble. I'll save that away. Okay. When I save that away, I come back over to Navisworks. Let's see what's going on here. I want to say basically, if I have the right one, let's see if I can do it there. Now, see, I'm not actually pointing to the right folder. I need to be very careful about this in terms of which one it is. Let me take this one out. Let me append that again. Okay, for the MEP model, help me remember this. I swear I'm getting the one from session 17. In fact, there it is at 6:55. I just saved that. Okay, that should be it. Let's open it up. Okay, let me again update this. What's it telling me? It's telling me that I need to... The model hadn't changed since this test was run. I don't know, your results may not be accurately reflected. I got that. That I understand. Oh, I take that back. Now, this is where I get really, really dumb sometimes about looking at what's going on here. Yeah. By moving that down, I still have 32 clashes, but they move from new or active over to resolved. Okay, so in the scheme of things, that issue is considered closed right now. Okay, so, often, although you run into a whole lot of different clashes, there is something that seems like it's apparently very simple. Just sort of moving that whole duct system down, could really improve things. Now, at this point, I'm kind of okay with the structural framing versus the ducts. That's looking pretty good. If I clash ducts versus ducts, I'm probably going to have something else going on there because now I have my return air ducts and my supply ducts running together right in the same space. So I'm going to have to kind of keep on resolving and work this out. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is just, if you can harden all the fumbling around with files, go through, make some change back over in the Revit model, bring it back over here, say rerun or update the tests, and then what you're looking for is to try and get things moving over here from new and active over more to either approved or resolved, so you can say those issues are closed out. So that's your task. It's really just got to figure out some way to mess with your ducts to make that happen. And you can do that by changing the structured elements, or you can do that by going through and changing the ductwork elements in terms of what's going on. So different things to start playing around in here. Let me actually try running another test. I'm going to just say ducts versus ducts. I'm just sort of very curious about this now. So if I take all those level 3 ducts and duct fittings, and I can flip them with level 3 ducts and duct fittings. Okay, so there's a bunch of issues right there right now where I've got 38 issues where, well, either things are touching or there could be conflicts or something like that. But yeah, that's what I'm sort of was thinking was going to happen, was that because I moved the ducts down, I can just tell just visually that I have this problem where my return ducts and my other ducts. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Now that's actually, these are legitimate. These are just sort of places where things are just supposed to be touching each other, so that looks okay. Touching's okay. I don't care about touching in terms of that stuff. Okay, let's leave it at that for now. But your task is to go through and try and get your ducts so they're not conflicting with the framing. So, sort of makes sense? Okay. Despite all my fumbling around with files, hopefully you got some sensibility out of that, because most of my switchback problem really was just this issue of like I have too many different files open at the same time that have the same name. I should be better about that. Okay, let us finish up with this. Okay. Clash detection, you're going to try and reduce that number and kind of get that down to close to 0. Next up, I want to talk about the issue of 4D simulation and show you how that works, because that's kind of really kind of cool and actually not that bad to do. It's sort of fun and simple all at the same time. So let's give you a sense of how this works. And I'll just say zoom all out. Take a look at this. So I got this big old model. It's kind of hanging around out here. It's got these structural elements. It's got these ductwork elements. What I'd like to do is start building up the structure. I'm going to build it up by kind of indicating the foundations and the columns, or I'm just going to put together a relatively simple schedule of activities and start building it up one layer at a time. And again, you could go through and schedule everything, or you could sort of schedule a small number. I'm just going to schedule the structural elements. That'll sort of prove the point. You don't need to sort of do it to everything. So here's the idea. There is something called the timeliner, which lets you set up different tasks and time to those tasks. And then we can associate all the different elements in our model with those tasks. So for example, I can create a task down here that has, oh, it's something like foundations. So I can rename that. I'm trying to change that, and there it is. Foundations. And I can give that some sort of planned start date and some planned end date. Maybe it's going to take a couple days to get this done. Okay. I can add another task. Maybe this is going to be my first 4 columns. So again, I'm just trying to say columns level 1. Okay, and I'll say that's going to start afterwards and maybe run for another week, maybe 2 weeks, whatever it is. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm setting up a basic task timeline. This task timeline doesn't have any real intelligence as a CPM scheduling system. You know, it doesn't have the smarts of Primavera or Microsoft Project, any of those things in it. It really is just sort of names, planned start, planned end, and we have a task timeline that we can associate some things with. So as you go through and create your tasks, you can go ahead and put your tasks right in here and add them all in, 20 tasks or so to describe what's going on. Or you can go and do that in Microsoft Project or in Primavera, any other system, and bring that schedule in. It's really whichever way you prefer. Okay. So in terms of doing that, you can keep on adding things one step at a time. If you have actually created a schedule in Microsoft Project or Primavera or any tool, or I just even put them in Excel, let's make a little CSV spreadsheet that kind of shows what the names of different tasks and how these things can be set up. What you can do is actually link this file to something, a task timeline or data source, and within this, you could link it to, like a project file, a Primavera file, or a CSV file. Okay, so you can just link in some other file, and when we link in the other file, you just have to sort of tell it what the mapping is between planned start and whatever start was called in the other application. You just have to map the columns together. So, if you have a project file, super, I'm just going to bring in a CSV file. And out there in the session 18, see if I can find it out there. Ba, 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 120. Session 18. Under 4D simulation, I have this nice little timeline. I can bring that in. It just has some different columns, and within here, I'm just going to map some column names, some external field names. So there's something that they call task name here in Microsoft or in Navisworks. I'm going to map it to something I had called title. Display ID, I'm going to map to something I called task ID, some sort of task number. Planned start is expected start, planned end is expected end. It's just mapping columns together, but every program will have its own sort of things. And these are the essential ones. A name, some sort of ID number, a start and end. Okay, so if you set that all up, we can say OK. Let me refresh that to go ahead and build it out. And what will happen then is if I switch over to tasks, it'll have those tasks that I pulled in. Here's these first 2 tasks. Let me get rid of them now. Those are the ones that I created by hand. And here are the tasks that are coming out of that little file that I put together. So in that little file I put together, I have slabs, I have columns, beams, I even have exterior walls. I got a bunch of little things in here. So with this kind of schedule set up, and these dates are a little bit old, I created it about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now. With these dates set up, you can now go through and map elements over here to those dates, or to these different tasks. And let's show you how you do that. It's actually not too bad. It's a little bit mucky, but let me show you how it basically works. If I open the structural model, and I go looking in there at the different levels, I can find, oh, there are structural foundations. Okay, and those are all those rectangular footings. And I can grab those rectangular footings and just pull them down on top of structural foundations. And if I do that, you'll see the highlight in the model up here. Over here, you'll see also there's some sort of explicit selection. So I've selected some explicit elements, mapped them against that. So now, when I run the simulation, those elements will come in at this time frame. Will come in between that period of time that's dictated there. In a similar sort of way, if I want to get the level 1 columns, I can go over to the selection tree, see if I can find the structural columns. And they're pretty easy to find also for level 1. So I can take them, I'll pull them down in there, and I'm mapping against some sort of explicit selection. Now, beams and joists gets a little bit harder because the way it groups beams and joists is a little bit hard to tell in the Navisworks structure what it considers to be a beam and what it considers to be a joist. You can come on over here. It doesn't really have much of a distinction here. If I go to the structural framing, you'll find that at level 1, actually, they have all they have is the K-bracing. I have to go to level 2. And under structural framing, you'll find there's some wide flange sections, and there's different sizes, and I can try to remember what those sizes are and drag those in. But going through and just finding things explicitly and dragging them in, it's good if you only need to do it once. It's a little bit painful if you have a whole lot of things to do, because the mapping between how things are set up here and how you have the tasks set up over here, it may not be very one-to-one. It may be a little bit confusing to try and keep track of that. So you can do it that way, but I'm actually going to show you sort of what I consider a much better way to do it, using something called project parameters that'll let us kind of skip that step, or actually do it a little bit better. Now, in terms of what's going to happen when we get done with this, we're going to click the Simulate button and run a simulation. Okay, and in the simulation, all we really do is say, well, let me configure it. You can configure these settings here, excuse me. Oh, whether you want to do it 5% at a time, that would be 20 frames. I tend to do that 1 day at a time. Okay. And if I do it 1 day at a time and say OK, then I run it. You'll see what happens is it marches through time. It's kind of interesting. It's not showing me all those things. Oh, I'll tell you why. Stop it right now. Another important aspect we have to sort of associate with each of the different items is what kind of task is it? Is it a construction task or a demolition task? And I need to go through and over here say that these things are construction tasks. That means new things will appear as opposed to demolishing or something like that. Okay, let me run that again. So, not very exciting, at least as a starting point. You saw the basic little foundations came in, and then the columns came in on top of that. But let me show you what it looks like when it's a little more developed. This is where you're going to head to. I'm going to open up another file. And under session 18, I have one that's all stashed away and ready to go under 4D simulation. It's going to be a Navisworks document because I have everything loaded into a single place ready to simulate. So if I bring this open, you'll see that, again, it has these tasks. It has a bunch of tasks, but you'll see I actually have a lot of things associated already. So in terms of building this building, when I say simulate, let's see what happens. Okay. It started out by putting a slab. Can you see that kind of green slab? Okay, then I have the columns coming in. Then I have the beams. Beam systems. Okay, putting some exterior walls in there. Starting to build it up. This is the idea of what we're after. It's really that you can sort of see just at any point in time how far the building is going to be built. Marching through it a day at a time. But this is really actually incredibly useful to people who do construction planning, to actually see something like this at any point in time, get a snapshot of what we hope the building is going to look like. Okay, so you can run the entire simulation. When you get done running the simulation, you can export it as a movie if you'd like to share it with people and just have the movie file all readily defined. You do that by clicking over here, and you can say export it to either a series of JPEGs or as a movie. Another thing you can do that's kind of cool is you can pull back to any point in time. So if I want to see what it's going to look like in March or April or whatever it is, you can start just really having a pretty good idea of what it's going to be. And that's very helpful. There's a lot of people doing interesting research right now where you have models like this and you have a camera on site and you use that camera and you try and figure out, you know, if visually you're seeing what you expect to be seeing and is the project ahead or behind schedule, you know, just by comparing the visual images. That's what's going on. So this whole idea of 4D simulation, very, very powerful. At some level, it's really a pretty simple concept. It's just a whole bunch of tasks with starts and stops, and then mapping your elements to those tasks. And then as those tasks sort of march along in time, those elements get added in there. So at a high level, it's pretty simple to start thinking about this. But the confusion and what I always struggle with, it's not sort of setting up the task timeline. It's really just getting the right elements associated with each of the different tasks. And the problem is just the way the things are set up in the selection tree doesn't always match my intuition. So where I think about things being in terms of are those girders, are those columns, or you know, just what they are, it doesn't necessarily like register for me. And I have a hard time mapping those things in. So what I tend to actually do is rather than choosing things explicitly, okay, which sort of does it based on a snapshot of what's here today, I'll set up search sets where I actually go through and assign IDs to all the different elements, a task ID to the elements, but I actually do it back in Revit. Okay, and the reason I do it back in Revit is, although I struggle to find these things in Navisworks, I know how to use Revit really, really well. So in Revit, I know what a structural column is. I know what the joists are. I know which things were intended to be different things. So it's really handy to kind of associate things over there and kind of bring those IDs forward. So let me go ahead and show you in here. I'm going to sort of open up the columns. You bring up another one in here. We try display ID and move that up. Nope. Let me try the other one. Synchronization ID. I think on this one I put it in user 1. Let me try that. There we go. I actually have a field set up here, which is a bunch of different task IDs, and this is just set up in the, in the CSV file. What I would try to do is basically just associate a number with each of these different tasks. And the reason I like to have a task ID that I can associate is I can then go to Revit and associate that number with each of the different Revit items, and that'll make the link between everything. So if in your schedule you have different ID numbers for every different task, you can use that and kind of tie everything together. So let's think about how we might use that. For example, over here you'll see my columns on the first floor are 120, my columns on the second floor are 220, my columns on the third floor are 320. I just set that up as a scheme. That's just a scheme that I came up with for how to do that. So if I have these numbers and I'd like to associate these things with Revit, let me show you how that works. So we'll go back over to Revit, and I'm going to open up the architectural model. Or no, actually I'll open up the structural model, since that's the one I'm working with here. Okay. Just complain, make my life difficult. Let me see if I can open the structural model again. Here's the deal. Here's my structural model. Now again, what I like about my structural model is I understand in my mind that that's a structural column. I know that's what I consider to be a beam. I know these things over there are beam systems, okay, or joists. So each of these different items, you'll see if you choose them, there's all sorts of different fields. It really just is a big database, and there's all these different fields that are hanging around over here. But task ID isn't one of those. Okay, so I want to get a task ID associated with each of these things. I'd like to basically add another column or another field to the spreadsheet so I could add that information. How could I possibly do that? And it turns out you can keep on extending this database to add as much information as you want. It's really just a database with different fields. If you want to add your own fields to track different things, put them in. And where you put them in is as follows. All these different fields are really just what's considered parameters. And you can add your own parameters. There's something, let me find it right over there, called project parameters, which lets you define your own fields. Okay, and within that, you can go through and set up your own things. So for example, if I choose that, I can add a field. And I'm going to create a field called just task ID. Okay, what's going to be a length, a piece of text, an integer. I've used text just because, oh, text is easy. Then I could be 120A, 120B. Text is very flexible. There's the issue is it a type parameter or an instance parameter? I tend to make my task IDs instance parameters because I want to be able to control every individual piece when it's going to be not the entire class coming in at the same time, but I want to be able to control that this column may come in this week, that column may come in next week, the next one may come in the third week. So I'm going to make it a task ID, or an instance parameter. Then I can say what categories to apply it to. I'm just going to apply it to all. You may not need to apply task IDs to every category. That's sort of a simple thing just to be very quick right now. So we can choose the categories you want it to apply to. And I'll say OK. And it doesn't seem to change very much, but it did go through and change, giving us a field that we can now put values into. Okay, so now for that first floor column, what do we want that to be? That was 120. For that second floor column, I'm going to make it 220. For that third floor column, I'm going to make that 320. Again, where am I pulling those numbers? That's just a numbering scheme that I came up with for the different tasks. So I'm just mapping items to tasks, schedule tasks. Now, if I did it this way, you'd say, oh, well, this is not going to save us a whole lot of time. This still seems pretty painful. But what you're good at doing, what you know how to do in Revit is, for example, go to a view like this. And we can highlight all those things. And I can filter those down and say, give me all the structural columns, all 32 of them all at once. Okay, they're all 120. Okay, let me go up to the second floor. On the second floor, I can say, great, let's grab everything, and I'll filter, so I'm only looking at the columns. Okay, all of those are 220. Okay. In a similar sort of way, let's go back over to this. The beams, we wanted to be 230. The joists, we wanted to be 240. Okay. So we can come over to Revit, grab all those guys on the second floor. I can grab all the girders. Okay, those are all the major beams. Say all those want to be 230. I can again grab all these things, check none, and say all these joists are going to be 240. So I hope what you're seeing here is my ability to select things, filter, and grab just what I want in Revit is actually pretty good. I'm very fast over there. And that if I go through and associate these things over in Revit, then actually as the designer, I could actually start associating things with the construction activity that have a little control as I go through and plan the entire process. Okay, so if you can handle the notion that you can assign these things over in Revit, just again, add one project parameter for task ID, okay, assign them over in Revit. Okay, let me save this away. Save this as, I'll say structural model with the task IDs. Okay. Now let's go back over to Navisworks. Whoop. Selection tree. instead of just, oh, let me do this. Let me go back to, which one was I doing? Okay. Let me go ahead and again add in that file. Refresh all that. Got my tasks. Okay, I am ready to start attaching things to it. I want to get those 120s, the 220s, and all those things associated over here. So what I'm going to do is bring in my file that has the, if I can find the Revit file, one that has the task IDs that I just created a second ago. Bring them on in. Now, at first you're going to say, oh, well, this doesn't look any different. Finish, finish, finish. Printing. That makes me wonder, what's it doing? Okay. Doesn't look very different. It still just kind of looks the same as it used to do. But we can actually change it around. In the standard view, you can't see those extra fields we added, but you can switch around and change it over to look at individual properties. Properties will show you individual parameters. So we can say that one of the element properties that we just created was called task ID, and you can see we have some values associated. These are search sets. So if I click on this, it'll give me everything that has a 220 associated with it. This will give me everything that has a 230. That'll give me everything that has a 240. So where is that useful to me? I can take those 220s, bring them on in, and those are going to be my level 2 columns. Drop them in right on top. If I can stop moving. Stop. It's like whack-a-mole. Okay. Let me adjust this so I don't have to move too much moving around. You think I would learn. Okay. I've associated all the level 2 columns. Let me get all the level 2 beams. In fact, let me get the level 2 joists and drag them in there. Oh, those level 3 columns, I got them right here. Of course, I can't get it to stay put, but you know what I mean. This is just designed to vex me tonight. It really is. Okay, but the point of all this is that once you go through and set up those search criteria, blah, 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 you set up those task IDs, it becomes really, really easy. And now you have complete control. If you want to go through and sort of associate specific task IDs, you can do that in Revit really quickly. Okay, and just have the mapping happen over here. The nice thing then also is if you change one of these things in Revit, it'll always be brought in. These search sets are dynamic so that it'll always choose the things that are associated with that appropriate task ID and pair them up with a task. So just since I know I raced through that pretty quickly, let me point you to a tutorial that'll actually help you with this in case some of this went by a little too fast, and that is on the BIM curriculum. If you go to the BIM curriculum and if you go to, it's under Unit 7, there's something called 4D Simulation and Construction Planning. There is a nice tutorial that actually talks about this whole notion of mapping these task IDs, using these task IDs. Looks like an amazingly familiar building because it was really done with the same exact building. Yeah. How you map them across and kind of set up those project parameters. So if you missed it because it went by a little bit quickly, or you don't, and you'll also be on the recording of this class, but it's all in here. It'll show you how to do that. It'll also show you how this is actually a very useful technique for, let me go over to Revit. You're going to find out that when we do a building like this, when we start getting a little more refined, we'll say, we're not going to put up all the columns on the first floor on the same day. We often sort of break a building into zones. This may be zone A, this is zone B, this is zone C. So we can just put that into our coding scheme. This is 120A, 120B, 120C. This is 220A, 220B, 220C. And you can very quickly start adjusting a construction schedule to be much more refined by just changing those tags, and always keep it in map, to your whatever your task schedule is. Okay, so, but yeah, just as a starting point, go ahead and take a look at that tutorial or the recording of this, and hopefully it'll get you through it. So with that, that'll get you through the tail end of the assignment. So after you do your individual work, do your clash detection, kind of do the initial report, then fix some things and see if you can get those clashes down close to 0. Okay, then take just the structural model, only the structural model, with a very simple, 20 steps, no more than that. Create a task timeline, associate some elements, and just run the simulation as a movie. And that'll get you through the end. Okay, beauty. Let us pause. Are there any questions about all that? How are you feeling? Pretty good? You're ready for this? You're ready for vacation. I know that's what you're ready for. But when you come back from vacation, you'll be ready for this, or even in front, through vacation, if you can sort of subdivide and get someone to just do that, get that bathroom done. Someone can get that done during the week. Someone else can run that ductwork in a little place so that when you come on back next week, it'll be really all just about the coordination and pulling it together. That'll simplify your life and make next week not so bad. Okay, beauty? Okay, let's adjourn.